Hey guys, I'm Brent.
I'm Lila, and you can find us on the web at www.braintrustlive.com.
That's right.
What a news week, you guys.
Oh my gosh, I know. Lila and I went on a walk earlier today, like you do.
That's right.
And hit up a farmer's market, which is a thing that you can be doing. Nobody knows whether you should be or not, but you can.
Truly nobody knew because no one was there.
Right. And I was saying to her, I was like, because I had started like pulling some stories, and I was just sort of like, God, the news was like, it was actually like a clear news week. Like, I just feel like so many weeks of besides the fact that like, what is time?
Right.
Like it's often sort of like hard to like recreate a week, and like in no way, obviously, is this podcast expansive in the sense that like it contains all of the stories. But I was like, and I don't think I was paying more attention this week, but it just sort of like felt like, oh, there was this big thing that happened, and then also this big thing that happened, and then also this thing that happened, and then there's primaries on Tuesday. I don't know. Just felt
I think it's because it felt more like a traditional news week where
it felt like there was like some weird normalcy.
Yeah, it didn't feel like a quarantine news week where you're like, has time passed? Is it March? Is it September?
Right.
Is it February? No one knows when the last time we spoke was. No one knows what they did yesterday.
It's easy to focus on other news also, like once you've decided that coronavirus is over.
Right, which America has.
Which
is funny because it's most certainly the opposite of over.
I know. We had our worst day since the beginning of May, since May 3rd. We had 30,000 cases on the 19th.
Juneteenth was also a day of tragic coronavirus news.
Yeah, it was. And we've had a couple of our worst days. I think yesterday actually was like 2,000 cases, which is our worst. And then like earlier in the week, we had also had our worst. And of course, you've all seen the numbers out of Arizona and Texas and Florida and various places, but it's bad out there.
Oklahoma, a place that Trump chose to gather what turned out not to be that many people.
Yeah.
Together to listen to him speak. But
one of the stories from this week actually was, following up on a story that we led with last week, because last Sunday it was sort of, we were in the midst of that Rayshard Brooks killing in Atlanta. They were still sort of really in the midst of that. It happened like late on Friday night. And so there were, they had burned down the Wendy's on Saturday, and then there were a lot of protests and people had been fired, and we were kind of in the middle of that. We got a very fast charge of first-degree murder on that this week.
Like our first success story of the protest era, finally.
Right. Meanwhile, just now, one of the police officers from Kentucky got fired. Like just one of them, and only fired.
Right. I was going to say, no one has arrested Breonna Taylor's killers.
Right. So Atlanta really
shot her in her home.
Getting to the bottom of things. Yeah. There. So
well, Atlanta, first of all, they now have their mayor now has a national profile. Keisha Lance Bottoms is suddenly like in the midst of the national.
Well, she continues
she's somebody who is a mayor that has gotten a lot of credit for the way that she's handled some of these things. And so I think she really had to ensure that they do something here, because otherwise she's going to lose all her cred.
Yeah, I know. I got a poll from some, thing that I get a polls from, which is actually secret.
From the internet?
Which is just, they send you an email, which is just like secretly a reason. It was secretly a fundraising, but I enjoy taking them anyway, because in my brain, like I'm picturing somebody like actually looking at the results, which clearly they're not. The only results they're looking at are whether I gave them money or not. Right. But it was, who do you think should be vice president? And like, as discussed, extensively on this podcast, they're just not great choices. I picked Keisha Lance Bottoms.
Yeah, why not?
Why? But it seemed like as good of an idea as anybody.
I mean, exactly.
She's supposedly, we said she's one of the last people being vetted in theory.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, I mean, you're right.
Yeah,
she's got to get some of this stuff right.
She's in the national mix. And already that was also the only police department where like the police commissioner resigned right away after a killing.
Right.
They knew they were going to get a lot of attention, and also that people in Atlanta were probably going to be like, listen, enough of this shit, and burn down a Wendy's until they did something. So, that's good news. The other good news is that someone has come up with a meme of announcing wellness things, and then the theme of it being that no one's arrested Breonna Taylor's killers, where it'll be like, taking care of your succulent. Step 1, arrest Breonna Taylor's killers. So like, my favorite things from Trader Joe's: 1, arrest; 2, Breonna; 3, killers; 4, killers. So there's a real meme attack going on the Louisville police situation. No actual attack, unfortunately.
Right, exactly.
Just memes. In any case, we come here to talk about elections.
That is what we do here. there's some
what we
big news this
intended.
week, and we are going to get to it, but nobody's paying attention to these elections, at least in the national media yet. Anyway, they probably will on Tuesday, especially when there's upsets, and it
That's
seems
right.
like there could be. So we're going
There could be upsets.
tell you about them. We
That's
mentioned
right.
a couple of these last week, but there has been even further movement. There has been some polling, although scant, and there have been some new endorsements. There's been new fundraising numbers, so we're going to tell you all about it.
There's been some exciting endorsements too, because there's been like real endorsements, not like bullshit endorsements where like, it's like cute when progressives endorse each other because obviously someone needs to start. But like,
right, it's like you can count on AOC to like show up for some like a progressive nobody like in a primary.
Exactly,
like,
and we love her for that. She's who lays the groundwork for somebody else to come in and announce it. But I think this week we got some senator endorsements in upset races that could be a real thing. So we start with Kentucky.
Yes, Kentucky. Both Ayanna Pressley and Elizabeth Warren endorsed this week.
I mean, what a dream. First of all, that's the dream team. That's the Warren dream team. If you get Katie Porter in there, then you've got all of the dream team.
I know. Yeah.
So there's a couple of progressive groups that finally jumped in because they realized there was going to be an actual race, which is nice. Yeah. So Indivisible and Democracy for America endorsed him. Move On, Working Families Party did earlier in the week. And now it looks like he might be in the lead.
Right. Yeah. There's a new poll.
Amazing.
I know. There's a new poll out that was done by Civics. And it was done, I think, for some progressive polling company. So, whatever.
Right. Take with that.
And it showed Booker ahead 44 to 36%. And that was taken between June 13th and the 15th. Booker also released like his own internal poll because like it showed it getting closer. He was still down and he was like just outside the margin of error. So it seems like whichever one of those you trust, you can sort of, or if you trust neither of them, you can sort of still, assume that it's going to be close in theory. Anyway.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like you shouldn't trust either of them, but what all of this is telling us is that this has become a close race. And because voting itself is going to be very unpredictable because we don't really understand who's going to be able to make it to the polls and who isn't. They have very few polling places set up in Kentucky. We don't know how well their absentee voting worked. We're also just like not really sure. It could be that progressives in their excitement kind of blow out the lackluster Amy McGrath supporters. It could be that Amy McGrath supporters, in having had the ability to see the momentum from months ago, could blow out progressive voters because they just like.
But do they really care enough? Like, are the McGrath people like really thinking to themselves, God, I'm so excited to go vote for a senator who once accidentally thought maybe they should be voting for Brett Kavanaugh? Like, is that what gets people excited in Kentucky? Maybe it is. I don't know about Kentucky.
I was going to say, we don't understand Kentucky. But what we do understand is it seems like what was supposed to be an easy win for Amy McGrath is now a real race. It's happening really late in the game. And so even if Booker doesn't pull it out in the end, I think a lot of that will probably end up coming down to logistics. It won't come down to excitement because the momentum is with him right now.
Right. That's where the movement is. Like this was a blowout literally weeks ago.
Exactly. Speaking of races that were blowouts just weeks ago, Jamal Bowman also just like killing it out there. And because of his sudden surge, like all of these old fart politicos have like jumped in to endorse Eliot Engel at the last minute, including our very own Hillary Clinton.
What a brave choice she did.
She saw a candidate who was fighting for his 17th term. Right. And she thought, I got to get in there. Who
recently declared that he literally wouldn't care about anything that was going on if he didn't have a primary. Like, that's right. On a microphone. Like,
and if that isn't enough of a justification to primary everyone.
Right. Not even the New York Times endorsed this guy. I mean, what a bozo Eliot Engel is. He's been in Congress since the beginning of days.
Yeah. It's like, this is such an embarrassing end because he's someone who, when he was elected, was a sort of New York progressive. He's been a reliable partner to most, on sort of most moderate progressive causes. He's, the electorate has moved to the left around him, but he was one of the more progressive members of Congress for literal decades.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. And
just like know your moment to exit.
Right.
He's been a reliable partner to the left for a long time.
Totally.
And it's now time for him to retire. And
that's right.
Hillary Clinton should know that, and Nancy Pelosi should know that, and everyone on earth should know that.
I know.
Because he admitted it himself.
And if you're thinking to yourself, well, Hillary Clinton, that makes sense for her because she's probably like released a slate of endorsements for like a ton of incumbents across the country in primaries far and wide. And that makes sense for her because, the DCCC doesn't want any primaries or anything. So it's like, she's just really out there and she's like helping incumbents and really helping mainline Dems. No, this was her only primary endorsement of the entire cycle, was to jump into a race that is probably at this point unwinnable, to save some old white guy who's been in Congress since the 80s that she's probably just personal friends with, which okay, fine. But running against an exciting Black guy in this district who's running on progressive ideals, who's been endorsed by literally everyone who could be considered the future of the party.
That's right.
I would have
it's
thought
so
it's
transparent
surprised me that she did it mainly just because it just seemed like a loser.
Yes.
Besides whether she probably agrees with him on everything, it just why getting on the wrong side of this? You can't.
Who knows more about losing elections than Hillary Clinton?
Well, fair.
This is just her style.
Right. But there's a recent poll there that has Bauman ahead 10. And he's just recently raised a bunch of money. He just announced a fairly large ad buy going into the weekend. And this
he got the Warren, Presley, Katie Porter endorsement.
Yeah, even Katie Porter. And some of these I think it's important to remember why those are important for a few reasons. A, because Ayanna Pressley and Katie Porter are the best.
Right.
And we can all acknowledge that who's better, right? Nobody. But you also have to remember that there is a rule in the D trip that you are any person or group or anyone who supports a progressive primary challenger gets blacklisted. Remember? So these people are not only making a bold statement by picking, somebody to run against or to beat Eliot Engel, but they're also doing it really, to a degree, risking, themselves.
This is why Warren started Warren Democrats, though. It's the same reason Sanders started, our revolution. It's so that progressives can make these choices in important. This is an important race to draw this line in, because it's one thing if Eliot Engel has no primary challenger and he's just a guy who's running for office for the 100th time, and you can endorse him then if you want, if it's against a Republican. But it's another when you have a candidate that the D-Trip has gone, fallen on a sword to endorse. And you, as a person whose entire brand is fighting for progressive causes, see this great candidate challenging him. This is why you start your own organization. This is why Presley and Porter can do it, because they are getting money from the Warren Democrats.
Right, exactly. And they're getting their own money. They send out an email. And they
exactly. This is why Liz Warren started Warren Democrats, because she saw that work for the Sanders coalition. Right. She saw groups like Justice Democrats and other groups come and provide support to progressive challenger candidates. And that was a really successful strategy. It's why we have an AOC. So I feel like you're going to see all of Warren's presidential endorsees have the freedom to make some of these choices. And you're going to see very few other people have that freedom. And it's going to be because these candidates have settled on a different fundraising strategy.
Yeah, they've got cover, basically.
They've got cover, yeah. And then also there's all these other groups that are also endorsing in these races all of a sudden. Obviously Sunrise Movement does this kind of thing, but Move On and Working Families Party, and also Democracy for America and Roots Action, and all of these progressive groups that oftentimes, even when there is a race like this, if it's not splashy, they stay on the sidelines. Have, because of these high profile endorsements, can also go and make endorsements for a challenger. Totally. Something like Move On doesn't want to be on the wrong side of Eliot Engel if he's the only one running. They make a calculation on the basis of how exciting is the challenger candidate and how likely is it.
And that's why you see some of them coming late a little bit too. Which has kind of gotten on the wrong side of some progressives. There have been a lot of sort of progressives, at least sort of the real kind of grassrooty people who have been sort of a little disappointed at the lack of support for. Especially in some of these Senate primaries, where was everyone while the DSCC was, funneling $40 million into the Amy McGrath campaign. But anyway, that's a separate.
But that's a predictable outcome of this moment, because the thing that we should have known in the New York City primaries, especially, is that because of AOC, there were going to be, and there, that year that AOC won in 2018, there were primary challengers to a lot of these old line progressive seats. And listen,
yeah, well,
these seats are pretty progressive. It's that New York has moved to the left of them.
Well, that's the thing.
It's not that these are like horrible human beings, but when the movement is the movement, you know?
Right. Well, and Carolyn Maloney is one of those people who had a race in 2018, and she's running against a few people, but her main challenger is the same challenger that she had in 2018.
He got 40% of the vote. He got 40% of the vote in the last race. And you have Yvette Clarke and Greg Meeks. They both have primary challengers. I mean, this is when you see something like what happened in AOC's district work, and you realize that there is like an opening for something like this. Like, I don't know why they didn't have their eyes on these candidates this whole time.
Yeah, I know.
Progressive groups. I mean, I know, I know why the establishment wasn't looking for them.
Sure.
But you know, I mean, we're talking about even Jerry Nadler has a primary challenger in this race who's actually getting a decent amount of press. She's not getting, you know, widespread endorsements or whatever, but but I mean, a lot of these. We're talking about 2 committee chairs. You know, Carolyn Maloney is now the chair of the Oversight Committee. Jerry Nadler is the head of the Judiciary. Like these are all people with a lot of seniority, and so this is a really, politically to the Democrats in the House, this is a really important sort of delegation. Yeah. And so I'm sort of shocked that because of that the left wasn't prepared to like go in when they did. But
I agree.
In any case.
Virginia also has a primary on Tuesday, and they don't have much exciting going on, but in researching what is going on in Virginia, I stumbled across a pretty solid story about one of their House races that is going on. They are having a Senate primary. It's just 3 boring Republicans to take on and lose to presumably Mark Warner in their Senate race. That's probably like a safe Mark Warner win for the Dems in November. But there is a congressional district coming up that the Democrats are eyeing a flip for the first time in like over a decade, because this specific district has been like moving a little bit further to the right, which is it's sort of a bit of an anomaly in Virginia. But it's kind of like in the part of the state that's more conservative. But anyway, it's currently being represented by one of the great names I think we talked about specifically after 2018. Denver Riggleman, by the way, Republican, who really got on the wrong side of his own party because he officiated a gay wedding.
Oh.
And so Republicans are not having a primary for his seat, but they did have a drive-through convention where
of course they did.
Where they picked a nominee. And they threw out Denver Riggleman, presumably because of this gay wedding.
Poor Denver.
They chose Bob Good, which go by Robert.
First of all, Bob Good. Like, get real. This is a seat that has ridiculous named people. They don't know better in this district, and you can tell.
Right. But anyway, all of the people at their drive-through primary or drive-through convention voted for him, and he identifies as a, quote, biblical conservative. And he's full lunacy. Like, abortion with, no exceptions, like all of the list of like any, gays are abominations and should be stoned. I made that one up, but like presumably
it's the biblical conservative platform.
Yeah, exactly. And the Democrats actually are running some real folks. They probably didn't think that they were going to have quite the opportunity they were going to, but there's 3 people in that primary. They're probably boring people. Like they're the type of people that like would be recruited to like run in a race. So it's like,
also, they're running
find a Marine and find somebody who went to Harvard and find a woman and find it, they're like those types of people, but like they all have more money on hand than Bob Good does. There's this, there's a feeling that could be like a congressional pickup for the Dems there, because the Virginia Republicans at their drive-through convention really mucked it up.
What a mistake to make, because it's a Republican district.
Yeah, it is. Oh yeah.
Like this is just them being, first of all.
Yeah, they've had it for like 12 years.
There's no better person to run in a district like that than someone with a memorable name. And I'll tell you one thing about the name Bob Good. It's that it's in its lunacy also not memorable. Like Denver Riggleman is like a parody of a congressperson that you put on like 30 Rock.
Yes.
That's the name of a parody of Denver Riggleman.
Right. Bob Good also has like the campaign ads against, Bob Good write themselves too. The things that are bad or
bad about Bob. Take it from Brent. He writes promos for a living.
And that's not even hard.
No, that one's a giveaway.
That's a gimme.
Yeah.
Some real low-hanging fruit, as they say.
In high school, there was an administrator at our school whose last name was Satin, but it was spelled Satan.
Oh, sure.
We had a Mr. Satin who was actually Mr. Satan. And
Right.
I often have thought, he was like, here's the thing. It's hard to know because we made so many jokes about it that it was impossible to tell whether we had created the mystique around him being mean or whether he was actually mean himself. But it was, I've often thought about what would happen if Mr. Satin / Satan ran for office. Like that was like my first.
Oh yeah.
Like it just seemed like every time that I wrote a complaint about something that had to do with him, which I've had to do in the past through my 9/11 health work, I've had to reference him at various times. I've often just felt like this is like a gimme to me to just like have this guy who on paper's name is, Satan.
Yeah.
So Bob Good, I feel like in being a biblical conservative who's obviously incredibly bad is going to
That's it.
have his own
there it is.
thing. In any case, there's also some Colorado primary excitement with Monsieur Hickenlooper.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That everybody thought was a gimme. But I remember in reading this, I was like, oh, I guess this kind of makes sense because I think talked about on the podcast when he finally did announce that there were a lot of in-state people who had already been running for quite some time that were kind of pissed because like everybody hopped on the bandwagon, obviously. And like, look, we were begging him to run in this primary because like he had no business in the presidential, but like he kind of did it in a way that was, you're absolutely right. It was shitty because like he had people who were running, who were fundraising and like, look, anybody can run for anything they want to. Like God, John can go for it. But like, it was more sort of like that the apparatus just like fell immediately behind him and like started funneling money to him and just sort of like declared him the candidate. Like, and the guy that he's running against, at least his most competitive challenger, is like the former speaker of the state house there. So I mean, it's not, and he's run for statewide office before. He ran in Senate primary before. He's not it's not as if Hickenlooper just like got into a primary that like didn't have any like credible people in it.
Right.
So, but apparently, and their primary isn't until June 30th. There's new polling that has, what's his name? I don't know, whatever the guy he's running against, his name is. He's got a name. He's got a name. Hickenlooper's only ahead by 12 points. And he's of course running on a very moderate.
And that used to be a much bigger divide. The 12
much bigger,
points,
right? That's
dramatically.
That's much tightening. And apparently, what I learned this week was that Hickenlooper actually just recently had to pay some fines for some ethic complaints when he was governor. And he of course said something to the effect of like, oh, it's a bunch of conservative groups that brought these complaints. They're just trying to bring me down in my primary, which is maybe true. But he was subpoenaed and then didn't show up to court. He got put in contempt of court. He had to pay a couple of these fines. He was actually found, he was guilty of a few of whatever it was that they charged him for. They were like small fines. So I'm sure it was like piddly things that they probably were just trying to mess up the primary, but like he didn't handle it great. And he was like made some news because of that. So like, this could be interesting. His opponent is running on Medicare for all and a Green New Deal, and Colorado is like up to shenanigans. So
truly,
we'll be curious to see how that plays out, how, if any of the progressive folks do jump into that. I actually think Warren has already endorsed Hickenlooper. Also he ran for president, so like there's a little bit of a different sort of like club there, But
okay, so if you are a progressive and you're looking for news on this race, the guy's name is Romanoff.
Romanoff, that's right, Andrew Romanoff.
Andrew Romanoff, yeah.
Yes.
So if you are A, looking to donate to progressives in exciting primaries, B, looking to follow news about what happens to Hickenlooper because he has a funny name, and also you would like Colorado to flip the seat, keep an eye on that.
And this is, I was talking to a friend of mine this week because I was asking, who is a sort of very mainline Democrat, and I was asking him if he had been following what's going on in Kentucky. And he made a good point to me where he was just kind of like, well, that is a competition to lose to Mitch McConnell. And while Kentucky has elected Democrats statewide, even sort of recently, like he's probably not wrong about that. This is, so like, throwing thousands of dollars at Charles Booker, maybe not the best use of your money. I mean, if you have it, spend it. Like I sent him $20, like also that, whatever. But like this is a race where like the winner of this primary probably beats Cory Gardner.
Yeah.
Like in Colorado, it'll be close. It's probably considered a toss up, but like Colorado moving fairly blue, and the challenger, like I said, is like an actual real candidate. So like, this is a place where you can sort of like spend good money, I think.
Right. Yeah, if you're somebody who likes to do really practical politics as opposed to ideological politics, like I think, like
I said that's what I
The
I
benefit
said
of
to
donating
Galen, I
to
was
Booker,
like, sometimes I have to, as a progressive, like take small victories. And
yes.
like a victory it would be worth it to me to give money to Charles Booker and have him win that primary and then lose by 50 points to Mitch
Also,
McConnell.
it would be worth it to me to have a progressive apparatus built in Kentucky so that small races in other places have the apparatus to, like, the benefits are a little more long gamey.
Yes,
even if
I agree.
he doesn't win.
100%.
Whereas I think if you're somebody who doesn't believe in that style of politics, and the Democrats have many people who don't believe in that style of politics, short-sighted thinking is one thing that we on both sides of the aisle seem to agree on. Then this is a way for you to accomplish a short-sighted goal while also accomplishing a longer game goal.
Agreed.
So
yes.
think about that. And then we move on to yesterday's greatest achievement.
Bonanza.
America's greatest yesterday achievement, which was managing to embarrass Trump mightily at his much anticipated Tulsa rally.
Yeah. Did you know that there's not even plans for the next rally?
Well, my aunt was asking earlier today. She was like, "Do you think he does any more of these?" And I was like, "Only if his attempts to deflect from this fail so miserably that he needs to be celebrated again and decides to risk it." Right. This was wildly embarrassing. First of all, they tried to step on this news, but it got out anyway. It got leaked by someone that 6 staff members had tested positive the morning of the rally. So 6 of his advanced staff tested positive for COVID at this rally where they were defying COVID. Already before anything started. Yeah. Then the overflow area speech that he was going to deliver before going into his triumphant
I think it was
rally.
Pence that was supposed to do that one, actually, I want to say.
Yeah, Pence was supposed to do that one. Was canceled because no one was in the overflow area. And that's because there was not, as Brent put in the notes, flow.
Right, there was barely flow.
There was not flow in the regular area, so there couldn't be overflow.
That's right.
And so they do like a circle of the overflow area. And I hear my cousin who lives in Oklahoma said that what she heard happen was that they had people in the overflow area and those people were told that they either had to go inside or leave because they hadn't filled the regular area. So they had to push all the overflow people into the traditional flow area because there was no one there. And as someone that my dad read somewhere that there were more blue seats visible than red hats.
The seats were blue. That's good. Yeah. Nice.
So the arena was fairly empty. I think 6,000 people or so finally got there, but we're talking about an arena that seats 19,000 people. And also in Oklahoma, which my cousin also noted for us, you can basically fill an arena for any purpose. They're going to the high school football team there could have filled that arena. They go to arenas constantly to watch terrible sports that no one except people in Oklahoma care about at dumb times of day.
I was going to say that arena has probably been filled for a rodeo event.
Exactly. It's not hard to fill an arena in Tulsa. So that's a second layer of embarrassment that I hadn't even thought of because I've been in many empty arenas in places that, to watch things no one cares about. I've watched skating competitions in half empty arenas. I'm never surprised to see that be the case. But if you can't fill a football stadium in Oklahoma, then you haven't done it right. Yeah. The speech was vintage Trump.
I know you watched it.
No, here's what happened. I want to give a shout out to my friend Kat Calvin, who live texted it for me so that I could fast forward to all the important parts when I later went back to watch.
Oh my God, amazing. Okay, great.
So she basically texted the entire event to me as it was happening so that I was able to live the excitement because I was not in front of my TV as this was going on. And that way I was able to go back and watch all of the best parts without worry about the rest of the parts.
Sure.
Most of the parts were great. So, first of all, he told us that testing is a double-edged sword. Because, when you test, you get
This is a narrative that he's really going to. I think that this is clearly a narrative that he has invented and thinks is really genius on his part. You know what I mean? He thinks that this is really, that he's really truly pulling one over on everyone, which you can't be doing when you're telling everyone what you're doing anyway. But
it's hilarious that he always says this like he's delivering some important wisdom, but what he's in fact doing is explaining the scam. He's explaining that he's scamming us in a tone that suggests that he thinks he's delivering a really thoughtful
that's right
about science.
Yeah.
He did come up, I don't know if he came up with this. He did call COVID Kung Flu.
Oh no, that's not him. No.
That was, no.
I've seen that on the internet.
Yeah, but he went on about all the diseases that COVID is, or something like that. He said something really weird about.
Sure.
That wasn't right about COVID. In any case, there were two really iconic moments. One is the 20 minutes that he spent pontificating about walking on ramps, about ramp walking footwear, about times he successfully walked on ramps, about what the fake news didn't show about his ramp walking abilities. He went on and on and on about walking on ramps, which is such an oddly specific thing to do. And it just went on forever. It was so funny.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
And then the second brilliant moment was that he actually brought a prop cup of water to
he loves a prop.
He loves a prop, and I love him with a prop. I mean, his best press conference, in my estimation, which I've talked about all the time on the podcast, the reason it's the Trump Steaks press conference is because it was just props. It was all props all the time at that press conference. He brought steaks, he brought water, he brought magazines, he brought everything.
Right.
In any case, so he brings a prop cup of water so that he can demonstrate that he does know how to drink out of a cup of water with one hand, because he'd been ridiculed for drinking like a toddler. And the audience like burst into boisterous applause as he demonstrated drinking water out of a glass.
Yeah. I know, being a narcissist like he is, and an egomaniac like he is, I know for certain, not because I'm a narcissist or egomaniac, but I'm certain that he spent literally all week practicing that.
For sure.
He's been sipping sipping water out of cups in front of a mirror for 7 straight days.
I was going to say, the one thing that I think you can trust Brent and I on as two only children delivering a podcast, the behavior of narcissists might be in this situation. If you want to really get into the head of an egomaniac, ask two only children to talk about politics for an hour once a week in your ears. Yeah,
that's true.
So we know exactly what he was doing.
Right. I was just telling Lila about an instance of this very thing before this podcast started.
Exactly.
There was a photograph of me taken where it looked like potentially I might be balding, and it's all I've thought about for the last 24 hours.
Also, it was definitely the light.
I've been staring at myself in the mirror basically every moment that I've been awake.
I mean, listen, what are you so busy with alone in your home? We've prepared our whole life for this moment. This is what an only child is prepared. We've been preparing for literal decades for a moment where we have to think about ourselves a lot in front of a mirror.
So true. So, I know. It is.
In any case, what we know for certain is that Donald Trump practiced drinking out of water.
That's it. That's the point that we're trying to get at.
That's the point we're trying to make. He tried to blame protesters for keeping crowds out of the rally.
Yeah.
There was one small protest, and one lady in an I Can't Breathe shirt was arrested. It seemed like he maybe thought she had personally kept all the people home.
You know what? If she did, she deserves.
I mean, she's a hero. She's an American. She was like a 60-something kindergarten teacher who got a ticket. She was a ticketed audience member, and they arrested her for wearing an I Can't Breathe t-shirt, which is, by the way, illegal. And the other heroes in this story are all of the kids who decided on TikTok to buy tickets.
TikTokers, K-poppers,
everyone. TikTok crowd really came
good
at this event.
Yeah, because they all signed up. That's why they thought that they had so many people coming. That's why they had 1 million respondents to this.
It was because a bunch of K-pop fans and TikTokers got tickets. And K-poppers have been really coming through in numerous ways, because they've also been trolling the white supremacist hashtags.
Yes, that's
so anytime that you now see like a really horrific hashtag trending on Twitter, it's almost always K-pop fans who are just posting memes about K-pop with that hashtag. It's been genius. I never understood the power of fan movements in quite this way until just this year. In any case, the other weird thing he did is he referenced like 1 million times during this speech that people call him sir, which is another thing a narcissist might do in the speech.
True. Yeah.
And then he called Biden a radical leftist, which, listen, but
if only.
If only. That's just not how it goes.
I know.
In any case, if you are looking for a sitcom's length, and like worth of entertainment, I would recommend the ramp walking portion of the speech, because it was so weird, and like he changes subjects a lot in it, but somehow always comes back to a point that I can't believe that he has had to make in the first place, let alone made for 20 minutes, which is just that he knows how to walk on a ramp.
Right.
Which is something that toddlers know how to do. So, in any case, bad week for Trump for other reasons as well.
Oh my God.
Turns out stealing the Supreme Court is not as easy as it looks. And like, listen, is this definitely the Supreme Court just trying to play us so that we don't disband the Supreme Court because they've lost all legitimacy because there's a stolen seat and they don't want the next president to pack the court?
Right, or they're buttering us up for when they, get rid of abortion or something.
Yeah,
or,
exactly. Like, keep your eye on the Supreme Court. Don't let your guard down around the Supreme Court.
But there were two great rulings this week. The first one being that you now nationwide can't fire someone for being LGBTQ.
Can you imagine in 2020 that you, up until 3 days ago, were allowed to potentially, depending on the state you live in, fire people just for
being I can, because it was less than 10 years ago, I think, that we got rid of sodomy laws. So yes, I can actually. But yeah, it's wild for sure. And I think something like 17 states still had no protection at all. Yeah. So it was like a real patchwork, and even more so had some sort of like very questionable kind of like fake protections. So it was like something like 20 some states. It was near half of states, and like more than half of people. I think the Williams Institute at UCLA, which like studies things like this, like says that there's like approximately 7 million people who identify as LGBTQ, and like 4 million of them currently live in states that do not have protections.
Well, I would guess that number is probably exploding at a level that you can't keep track of, because the kids these days are don't defy labels so effectively.
Well, I think that's absolutely true. And I think, as much as like Gorsuch really sort of like did get into sort of like the laws and explain what, basically they explained it as sort of like, that as part of like Title VII, which was passed in the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination because of sex, that also extends to people who face discrimination due to sexual orientation or gender identity. And so they really sort of like did get into like, it was Gorsuch, so he had to explain himself away, certainly. But I think a lot of people did sort of like really look at this and sort of like see that there has been like a real sea change on this issue. I think certainly, some of them had to at least be thinking to themselves, this court, whether I voted for it or not, like John Roberts did not vote for gay marriage, like also probably like is a person who isn't stupid and probably thought to himself, this court just told gay people that they could marry. So like, how can this court tell these same people who can like be officially married in all 50 states that they then they could go be married and then the next day be fired because they got married?
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think also the one thing I would say about this ruling and the next ruling that we're going to talk about, the DACA ruling, is that neither of these are rulings that pit the rights of corporations against people, which is traditionally where the conservatives break from us readily.
Totally.
So
yeah, you're
they
right.
protect corporations. There's no corporation to protect in whether or not you can there's no real meaningful protection for a corporation for firing gay people just to be assholes. That doesn't affect the bottom line. That doesn't affect their ability to siphon all the money out of the economy and leave us with nothing. That doesn't affect the rights of corporations as people. And so in these situations,
I agree.
While sometimes they rule with ideologically farther left, they rule to the farther to the left ideologically, their main priority in there is to protect corporate interests. It's not to protect, they don't care about this. This is all window dressing.
Yeah, totally. No, I agree.
They don't care about this kind of thing.
Right. Because even Kavanaugh,
they can blow with the wind on this.
Right. Even Kavanaugh, who wrote one of the dissenting opinions, said that he was sort of like tried to apologize for like writing a dissenting opinion, because he said, this court has previously stated, and I fully agree, that gay and lesbian Americans cannot be treated as social outcasts or as inferior in dignity and worth, but we are judges, not members of Congress. So like his whole dissenting opinion was just that he felt like they were getting too like legislative, like in sort of like declaring this. So like
one might argue that this is the perfect place for judges and not members of Congress.
Well, I would agree. But it seems like we were very close to like having a 7-2 on this.
Yeah.
Really. So I think that's
they were hedging in their dissenting opinion.
Right. The other, Alito and Clarence Thomas like would prefer that we all be like rounded up and just like, killed in one fell swoop.
They're actual nonsense, contrarian nonsense. Right. They're not credible judges.
No,
I mean, not that Kavanaugh is I'm not trying to suggest
no,
that Kavanaugh is either, but
Right.
I'm just like, those two don't, they don't make judgments. They uphold their preconceived notions about the world.
Yeah, exactly.
The other ruling was a DACA ruling that said
Right.
that the Trump administration's attempts to end the DACA program were not legal. And so
Right.
DACA's back
and they
for now.
actually did, right. And what they really said, and I love this decision, like, for stupid reasons a lot, just because basically what they said, this was 5-4. This was Roberts joining the liberals. But they basically didn't say that DACA was illegal, which is problematic. Like, that's not what I'm loving about this case, because like there's still an opening for like them to go back and dig into this. But basically what they ultimately said was that the Trump lawyers were really shitty.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't say that exactly, but like they were basically like, they didn't give us a good enough reason that they tried to undo DACA.
Yeah.
Like that was, they just basically like, they didn't sell us.
Right.
That was why they cited
their ruling was basically, you guys are shit at your jobs.
Right. Yeah. Do better.
So
come
try
back
again.
and do better. Which is a problem, because they could come back and do better.
Right. And
that's
we don't
why,
want that.
Right. Like, obviously this was the ruling that we wanted here, in terms of like not having to like be at a point now where like we're trying to figure out like what to do with all of these people. But it also, there's still some questions about, because it really just kind of like sends it back to lower courts or to the administration to sort of like relitigate it. Or Congress could do something about it.
We need a legislative fix to this ultimately. This executive order BS is not a sustainable.
Right. And Trump is probably not going to be able to do anything about this, like, at least within the courts before the election. So like the most important thing to do here, besides something legislatively, would also be to just make sure that he like doesn't come back for a second term.
In
that's
so
important
many
on so many
cases.
levels. But
Situation.
Right. So there's also questions about whether like people should be filing new DACA applications. Like, does this like really allow for that? So like, it was sort of unclear, other than, no, what you tried to do, you can't do. But it didn't really it didn't say DACA is legal.
Right.
Which is what I think,
which would be a nice
obviously
thing.
that's the end game that we're all going for here.
Right. It would be a nice thing if they could figure out how to consider that potentially in the future.
Yeah. But they specifically said, like Roberts in his decision said, we do not decide whether DACA or its rescission are sound policies. The wisdom of those decisions is none of our concern, he said. So it's really just more about like them.
You guys are so bad at your job that we weren't even able to uphold a policy we agree with because we're assholes.
That's it. That is it.
And Donald Trump didn't take any of this very well.
No, he didn't. He had a really bad week in the courts.
He had a bad week with the courts and with metaphor.
Totally. Yeah. Because he tweeted after the Friday DACA ruling, he said, these horrible and politically charged decisions coming out of the Supreme Court are shotgun blasts into the face of people that are proud to call them Republicans or conservatives. We need more justices or we will lose our Second Amendment and everything else. Vote Trump 2020. And then he sent a follow-up tweet. Oh, so sad. He said, do you get the impression that the Supreme Court doesn't like me?
Buddy, you literally stole a seat.
2 of them are yours.
Court. 2 of them are yours.
1/4 of them are yours.
Stolen.
Right.
Like, pull your life together.
Right. And the one that was stolen was the one that wrote the LGBTQ discrimination.
Exactly.
That was Gorsuch. That's
poor little rich boy.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So tragic. In continuing bad news for him, John Bolton's book finally came out. Remember John Bolton, the mustache, who could have testified against Trump at his impeachment hearings,
right?
As he was approached to do.
But needed subpoenaed, and then they didn't subpoena him. Only Romney and I think Murkowski voted to like see more witnesses.
That's right.
So everybody in the story is terrible. John Bolton is terrible. The Republicans in the Senate are terrible. Republicans are everybody is terrible in this.
This is a story about terrible people and a mustache that will not quit.
Right. That's it. But last week, the Trump administration tried to sue John Bolton or his publisher to like not publish the book.
Right.
Coming out on Tuesday, I believe.
Yeah.
Although
don't buy it. Wait until it's at the library.
Yeah, I was going to say, do not give this man one single penny. He
you
doesn't
will
deserve it.
be able to get a free copy of this somehow and somewhere.
Yes.
And you should do that, and you should not buy his book.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, don't do that. They're going to tell you what's important in it, and it's apparently really boring.
Also, we're going to tell you what's important.
We're going to tell you what's important.
In just a second. We'll save you the time.
That's right.
Anyway, but they sued last Wednesday. It went to a DC district court. They heard like a 2-hour, arguments from both sides, like on Friday. And then on Saturday, the judge, Royce Lamberth, issued their opinion. He did not have time for anyone. He did not have time for the Justice Department. He didn't have time for John Bolton. My favorite part of his decision, he said, quote, "For reasons that hardly need to be stated, the court will not order a nationwide seizure and destruction of a political memoir."
The courts are so sassy this week.
So sassy. But they were also sort of like, hey, John Bolton, we do acknowledge that you did not go through the proper clearance channels for confidential or classified material. So like, be aware that just because we're allowing this book to be published does not mean that you can't, be in a
later be court-martialed.
Right. When we find out that you leaked a bunch of classified material.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out once it actually does come out.
Yeah. And it will be even more interesting to see how the election plays out now that we know that more than Russia might be involved in Trump's
he was asking everybody.
He's been asking everyone for help.
Was just
it's part of his plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is, by the way, like on some level, I think while it's important that people keep confirming that everyone's experience in the White House has had these qualities, this is in a lot of ways not new information, because we know that Trump is approaching foreign powers about helping him with the election. We've known that the whole time. We've known that since before he took office. Yeah. We know that he has a slightly less than stellar record on human rights. Certainly the way that he approaches human rights in other nations. We know that his staff thinks he's an idiot. We
add this to the pile of books written by people who have worked with him that all declare that he's not a man who cares about learning things.
Right. And that is what we've learned from John Bolton, the Moustache, as well.
Right. But there are some pretty good anecdotes in here.
Yes.
Some horrifying anecdotes.
Right. But most horrifying, all interesting.
Right. The biggest one that I think people were talking about, at least initially, when people started reading this, was that Trump also asked President Xi of China to help him in the 2020 election.
Surprise!
Right. He urged him to buoy his political fortunes by buying American agriculture projects, and then sort of like promised to waive some tariffs on China if China did that. And he like stressed the importance of farmers and increased Chinese purchasers of soybeans and wheat in the quote electoral outcome.
Yeah. He decided that
quid pro quo. That's what that is. That's quid pro quo.
Exactly. He was going on about how he needed the votes of Midwestern farmers and that President Xi could help him get those votes. And John Bolton
just buy some soybeans. We'll be fine.
I read the first 2 pages of the book. It was already boring, but I did it. And John Bolton basically sort of suggests that like all of these that all of these sort of quid pro quo like conversations are like things everyone knows is happening, and also like he can confirm that they're happening, and he can confirm that Trump has bad judgment and doesn't want to know anything and doesn't care about learning things. But that this is also something that everyone knows this.
Yeah.
This is known by all.
Well, right. Yeah, exactly. He also didn't have any real issues with China's concentration camps.
I mean, why?
Right. China was
why not
setting
round people up.
Yeah, China was setting up camps for these
well, they've
Muslims.
been cracking down on Muslim minorities.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Specifically Muslims.
Is it the Uyghurs? Is it the Uyghurs?
Yes, that's what it is. And anyway, but Trump apparently told Xi at the G20 meeting that he should just go ahead with it. He said it's exactly the right thing to do.
Oh, God. Well, and this is like, China already has been has been reprimanded by the international community for lots of religious minority roundups. And it's why it's first of all, it's why whatchamacallit comes to every city in America.
Because they can't go back to China.
Right. What are they called?
Oh yeah, the one, the dancers, the Chinese dancers. You've seen the billboards.
Right. What are they? What are they called? They're affiliated with
Shenyun or something like that.
Yeah. They're affiliated with Falun Gong,
right.
which is a religious movement in China is a kind of wacky cult in China. Or Falun Dafa is another way that they're referred to sometimes.
Yeah.
And the reason they can't go back to China in Shenyun, and the reason they're always available in your town at the exact moment that you're there every year without fail, is because they're just traveling around because they can't go back to China. But also the Catholic Church has been caught in their crosshairs.
Yep.
Falun Gong used to stage these crazy protests outside of Penn Station where they would have people in cages with fake blood all over them screaming and things like that. I remember that was the second most graphic kind of common protest you used to see in New York at one time. The first,
they do it here too, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure they do it here. I've never seen it here because you never run into pedestrians here. But
right.
They used to do it outside Penn Station, so that I would run into a lot. They were second only to the lady that would stand on a street corner on 86th and Broadway with really graphic botched abortion photos.
Yes.
And then scream.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are the two groups of people that really care about a dramatic protest. But so in any case, another revelation from the Pompeo book, from the Bolton book, is that Mike Pompeo thinks Trump is an idiot, which...
Yeah, and this would be a huge hit to Trump because he's one of the Trump loyalists.
Yeah.
He's a Trump guy.
This makes you really wonder about Mike Pompeo as a human being and a thinker himself.
Yeah.
But we've been wondering about that anyway.
Right.
But apparently, Bolton talks about in the book a meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un, where Kim Jong-un blamed the bad relationship between North Korea and the U.S. on prior administrations, and Trump was sort of like, "We'll work with you. We'll dispel all. We'll get a nuclear agreement." And they were like, "Great, this is great." And Trump told him that they would get the Senate to ratify an agreement with North Korea and it'd be fine. Yeah. And Bolton apparently says that Mike Pompeo passed him a notepad where he had scribbled, "He's so full of shit."
And then Bolton writes, I agree. So good.
And then Trump offered to help Turkey's President Erdogan get out of a Justice Department probe, apparently. His own Justice Department.
A U.S. Justice Department probe.
A U.S. Justice Department probe. He loves dictators. All of this, the one thing that all of these have in common, the Erdogan stories, the Kim Jong-un stories, is that Donald Trump is a man who loves strongmen. Yeah. He aspires to be a strongman. He's a comical parody of a strongman.
Right.
And so there's a reason all of these stories involve idiot strongmen.
Oh yeah, totally.
And so he's basically telling all these idiot strongmen, "We'll work with you.
Right.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about anything."
Right. He told Erdogan that he would, quote, take care of things, which I bet is probably a favorite thing of his to say.
Yeah. Of
course. I'll fix it.
Yeah.
I'll take care of it.
The probe, by the way, has a relationship to a story that we will get to in a little bit about a U.S. attorney that
because
was fired this week.
Right, because the people, the specific Justice Department that was looking into this situation in Turkey was the Southern District of New York, and Trump specifically said that those are not my people; they're Obama's people. So more on that shortly.
More on that coming.
Right. This is one of my favorites in the list.
Yeah.
Netanyahu didn't understand why Jared Kushner was running the Middle East peace process.
Like so many of us.
He and America.
Right.
Yeah.
Like so many of us. Yeah, apparently Netanyahu, who I think to play politics never really expressed this publicly, but behind closed doors was like, what the fuck is this guy gonna do?
Right.
And listen, I'm no Netanyahu fan, but I like him know that peace in the Middle East is not a simple something that some idiot 30-something with no political experience can solve.
Right, I know. Bolton said in the book, he said that Netanyahu, quote, wondered why Kushner thought he would succeed where the likes of Kissinger had failed. This is a good one too. He compared the White House weekly meetings to food fights. He said that the weekly meetings to discuss issues which were chaired by Trump in the Roosevelt Room often devolved into college food fights as opposed to careful decision making. And they had no lower level effort or involvement by relevant agencies. They were just sort of Trump just pontificating, worrying about what the media was going to think about various decisions that were being made. And then Bolton, this is my favorite quote of any of the ones that we're going to tell you. He said, quote, after these sessions, had I believed in yoga, I probably could have used some.
First of all, what is believing in yoga? What does it mean? to believe. That's like this. It's like, can you believe in football?
I know, like had I believed in exercise.
In an exercise-related hobby. Like, what does that mean? Like, and I say that as someone who does not like doing yoga.
Right.
I don't believe in yoga if what believing in yoga means is that I have to do yoga and enjoy it, because I don't. But that's not really what he's implying here. This is such a weird, like, attempt at a sort of like coastal elite put down, but it's like silliness.
Yeah.
Because it's like he doesn't know words. In any case, Trump also apparently wanders around complaining about Russia sanctions. And the US government is just like a big heap of Russia sanctions all the time. There's constantly Russia sanctions because Russia's constantly secretly killing spies and sending spies to things. They're up to shenanigans 100% of the time. 90 out of 100 news stories related to Russia are just news stories about them up to shenanigans.
Yeah.
Interfering in elections, sending spies places, killing other people's spies, the gamut. But apparently Trump just sort of like randomly walks around grumbling and complaining about these sanctions, even though he often has to justify them in public.
Yeah.
Other things about Russia he doesn't know is whether Finland is part of it.
Yeah, they were on, because they had that the
Helsinki summit with Putin.
Right, the summit with Putin was in Helsinki, Finland. Right.
Yeah.
And while they were on their way there, he apparently asked his advisors if Finland was a part of Russia or whether it was a kind of satellite of Russia.
Let me tell you who would not appreciate that question is the Finnish people who spent a long time making clear that they were not a part of Russia.
Right. I know.
They literally fought to ensure that they were definitely 100% certainly not a part of Russia.
Right. Maybe Trump is one of those Finland truthers.
Oh yeah,
online.
maybe he doesn't think Finland exists.
Right. Yeah, there's a whole community on the internet that thinks Finland is not actually real.
Right. I've been to Finland, and let me tell you, if Finland's not real, someone really went in a weird direction making up Finnish. So, I mean, if someone dedicated themselves to creating a language like Finnish, which is unfortunately real, then if Finland's not real and they went through all that trouble, I say give it to them.
This is another good one, because while he was on the way to that summit, he stopped in to see his friend Theresa May in the UK. And during that meeting, one of the reasons that we had Russia sanctions was because Russia killed a spy, a UK spy, and they killed him in England. So remember, there's a whole scandal.
Yeah, there was that.
There's
whole
like a double agent, like
and,
whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so those were one of the reasons why we had sanctions on Russia. Anyway, at this meeting with Theresa May, her national security advisor, speaking about that poisoning, referred to the attack as one nuclear power on another, like a nuclear, two nuclear powers attacking each other. And Trump said, "Oh, are you a nuclear power?" And then Bolton said, which I knew was not intended to be a joke. Didn't know if our allies,
our closest ally,
had nuclear weapons or not.
Yeah.
Ooh. Also, Trump loves to talk about Venezuela, and I mean, you probably already weren't
off topic. Oftentimes, randomly, at a time that you're like, "Why is Venezuela coming up right now?"
And the way he talks about it, you probably at least once to yourself thought, "I don't really know if I trust him to be speaking on this subject because he doesn't sound like he knows a lot." Yeah. And we can confirm that he doesn't, indeed, by way of John.
Your instincts were right.
Yeah.
Unless your instincts were wrong.
He insists that because we've heard him say this before out loud. Because he talks about toppling the Venezuelan government all the time, and he's insisted on military options for Venezuela.
Right, he wants to go to war in Venezuela.
Yeah, right, and he has told his advisors that the country is really a part of the United States,
which couldn't be less true.
It's not. But hilariously, in a meeting about the subject with Florida Republicans, when he was talking about wanting a military option, it apparently left Senators Rick Scott and Governor Ron DeSantis plainly stunned, was the word that Bolton used. But Marco Rubio was also there. But Bolton says that Rubio had heard Trump talk about the subject before and, quote, knew how to deflect it politely.
Oh, man.
You've got these people who are like reasonably intelligent people, even though I don't agree with them. Like, I think we can agree that, like,
well, they're functioning.
Rubio is like a general thinking person.
Right. Ron DeSantis, I have my questions about.
I know. Like, if you're plainly stunning Ron DeSantis with your stupidity, then like it's time to look inward.
That's right.
At that point.
Yeah, that's a feat that and a milestone you shouldn't reach.
Right. Yeah.
He also has complained that they can't arrest reporters, which
I know
is he wanted Bill Barr to or he's spoken to Bill Barr about his desire to force reporters to serve jail time and demand they disclose their sources. Two of the basic journalistic tenets that guarantee us a free press, which we don't even really have. But but he's like somebody who, like, every time that you hear him mention the Second Amendment, like, think to yourself, this is a man who wants to disband the free press.
That's right.
Like, the Second Amendment is second in listing to the First Amendment,
right.
making it only secondarily important to what the real amendment is, which is that even if you are a person who misinterprets the Second Amendment, forgetting that the first phrase in the Second Amendment is a well-regulated militia,
right.
forgetting that it begins with the word well-regulated,
yeah.
and you think that the Second Amendment means we should all run around with guns forever. The only amendment that you could argue is definitively 100%, and we know this to be true, more important than the Second Amendment,
right.
is the first one. The very first one. So, in any case, speaking of the First Amendment and also having a functioning government, Trump fired a U.S. attorney.
Right, the one from the Southern District.
The one from the Southern District.
That he said were Obama's people that he was going to get rid of in talking to the Turkish president.
Well, the reason that he needed to get rid of them is because they were leading a probe into members of his staff, including Giuliani.
Right, exactly.
So he had to get rid of them because they were investigating him.
Right, but this went down in like a hilarious series of events. Because Friday, Barr announced that Berman, this attorney,
Jeffrey Berman,
was stepping down. And then hours later, Berman himself put out a statement, and he was like, "No, I'm not. I just learned of this supposed resignation literally through Barr's press release." So then Barr on Saturday had the nerve to say, "Oh, well, you made this such a public issue and you made it a spectacle over your public service. So because you've declared that you have no intention of resigning, I've now asked the president to remove you as of today, and he has done so." That was effective, I suppose.
I mean,
in a way,
it feels like you could be removed without allowing yourself, without the Justice Department allowing itself to look like fools.
Yeah, exactly.
They could have, if they were just going to remove him anyway, just remove him. Don't announce his resignation without telling him.
Yes. Oh, man.
Trump wasn't involved.
Right.
So don't worry about that.
That was Bill Barr's decision. That's his department. That's Barr's department.
He's the one who hires and fires in the Justice Department. I have nothing to do with anything.
No.
So in any case, so the Southern District of New York lost their DA. I mean, lost their U.S. attorney.
Yeah.
And now I think the deputy U.S. attorney is filling in, I guess. I don't know. It's a curious thing to do that as publicly as they did at a time when they were very specifically being investigated by this attorney. And I think they just think they can get away with this kind of thing because no one seems to ever call them on anything.
Right.
The best that we could do to impeach the man was some fucking cockamamie Ukraine quid pro quo plan that was too difficult to even explain to anyone.
Right, I know.
This is a man who has literally just fired somebody who was investigating him.
Yeah.
And tried repeatedly to do that publicly when the Justice Department was investigating him.
Yeah.
And yet somehow can't do anything. He did do something this week.
I guess.
To assign the world's lamest policing order.
Right.
They're now going to ask police departments to ban chokeholds unless the officer's life is at risk, which is, by the way, already the rule in most places. And
also the Supreme Court has already said that under the Constitution, deadly force is allowed only when police officers fear for their own safety or that of others. So it's basically it's saying what we have already said under.
Right. This is currently the rule.
It's the rule. Yeah.
He just announced a policing order that was just reaffirming that the rules are still the rules.
Right. It does also create a national database of excessive force complaints, which is the thing that is also in the Democrats bill. So okay, fine, sure.
Right. It has some things that encourage police departments to involve mental health professionals when they're responding to nonviolent cases. But I want to know who exactly they think those mental health professionals are, because a lot of the reason the police took over in these areas was because we defunded departments that could have dealt with these issues in nonviolent ways. So it's all well and good to tell police departments after you have defunded federal resources that would be used to have alternatives to policing, to be well, try to bring along a therapist when you're responding to a complaint that a crazy person is running around in the street. Like, it's like, where is this therapist coming from? Who hires this therapist? Does the city pay for this therapist? Is there grant money available for this therapist? Like, what are we talking about here?
Right. Well, and I think they're going to tie some of these things to like federal grant money that like police.
Well, that's all they can do
have if they don't meet some of these standards. But yeah,
that's their only leverage here. Policing is a local. The policing policies are local, so their only leverage is they can declare some national policies, like determining what is an appropriate use of force justification, and then they can tie it to federal grant money. But they can't tell local police departments what their policies are, and so that means that you should vote for your local elected officials. Be careful in your local elections. That's where these things are decided.
I think the reason that it just felt so small was because, like, in the scope of the moment, it is so small. You know, it's not as if there were a bunch of terrible ideas in this thing. There weren't very many ideas, but I mean, I think that, like, to sort of like look out into America as the president and see everything that is going on and process that as like, let's do a database.
Well, but we're talking about a man who ran as a law and order candidate. This is like also blown up in part because he, as he did when he was announcing these policies, can't help but double down on police force, because that was what he promised when he got elected. I mean, this is a really awkward moment for him because he has to do something to quell this unrest, and he doesn't plan to, really. But I mean, he knows that unrest is the opposite of law and order. But his usual method of sending in the military, of sending in, a militarized police force or the military itself in the last, as was the case, is not working to quell the unrest. So he has to do something. And it's like the antithesis of what he promised. And he can't deliver what he promised because people don't actually want it.
No, exactly. That's the other thing. I mean, like I think where he probably did what he wasn't expecting when he ran on Law and Order, because usually that's a safe thing to run on. I mean, it's like it's a terrible thing to run on. But I think that, like, he probably didn't foresee, and look, who could have, that like the unrest would have better approval ratings than him. I mean, like people are, I mean, I almost said people are loving the unrest. That's not the right word, because the unrest is coming from like a dark part of like the country's history. But people are supporting the unrest. Right, exactly. So,
well, also, this policy doesn't do any of the things that you would actually, that doesn't even do the normal breadcrumbs things.
No, it doesn't. Like, they could have done no-knock warrants here.
That's an easy one, because first of all, why are they doing no-knock warrants?
Right, exactly. Like, once Rand Paul thinks that we shouldn't be doing no-knock warrants, it's like you could certainly put it into
I cannot think of a conservative who should approve of no-knock warrants. That's literally...
No, it's like an invasion of privacy. It's like very anti-constitutional.
Exactly.
Unconstitutional.
Anti-constitutional sounds stronger.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's not just doesn't get mentioned in the Constitution. It actively flies in the face of the Constitution.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, I can't think of anything that sounds like a better, more obvious thing than just ending no-knock warrants. That sounds like you're doing something. They didn't even accomplish that. And then also, like I said, when he announced it, he also went on about law and order. And so that made everyone feel like maybe he wasn't being that sincere.
Right. Or that he didn't get it.
Which is the
either
answer.
Or both are the things that happen.
Exactly. Brent is saving America.
Like, keep doing everything that you're doing. I like to, whenever anything like this happens that I have sort of like partaken of, then obviously like it makes me feel like I did something. But that's the whole point of like, that's the fun of going to protest, and the fun of sending emails and making phone calls is like seeing something that you helped get done. And then you're like, I did that. And it's sort of like, it feels good. So like, if you're out there making phone calls and things, keep doing that, because we found out just the other day that Adam Schiff is rescinding his endorsement of Jackie Lacey. And that was one of the early, things that like we were action items that we were supposed to be doing.
Right. And Brent very kindly let me copy his letter.
Right.
So I edited,
which I copied from someone else.
Brent had written that he copied from someone else. We emailed all of our representatives.
Right.
Our
county supervisors. I looked at Jackie Lacey's website to see like literally anybody who had endorsed her. I emailed Dianne Feinstein. Most of these people have not got back to me. I got a laughably unacceptable response from Garcetti's office. Right. But Adam Schiff took a note.
Well, this man's trying to run for statewide office.
For sure. Yeah.
So he's a man who's looking for notes at the moment. He's very rarely this responsive.
Right, I know.
So
it's true.
This was a real turn of events.
Yeah.
That's Jackie Lacey has been locally our sort of like main public enemy number one of the police brutality protests, and that's because she's not prosecuting any of our numerous police violence incidents and police murders, which happen constantly here, and are why our police commission is in hot water, our mayor is in hot water, and why we have a competitive DA race going on here.
Yeah, she's going to lose in November, I would assume. Yeah.
Well, that's the only reason she didn't lose in the primary was because there were two challengers.
There were two challengers, exactly. Yep.
But so, and then in other electoral news.
Right, in final news, I think, actually.
Withdrew from the VP race.
I saw this.
As if she needed to withdraw. As if we were waiting to hear about her announcement, her thoughts on it.
We all withdrew her.
Right. She had been
America withdrew her.
By our imaginations. Right.
Withdrew her. She had been withdrawn.
Yeah. She was a woman who was not in the running.
I know. It's so funny.
This is like me withdrawing from the VP race.
Right. Exactly. Right. I know.
Neither of us are going to be the VP. So that
she was on Lawrence O'Donnell and she said, quote, "This is a historic moment and America must seize on this moment. And I truly believe, as I actually told the vice president last night when I called him, that I think this is a moment to put a woman of color on the ticket. And there are so many incredibly qualified women. But if you want to heal this nation right now, my party, this is sure a hell of a way to do it."
I think it might stop short of healing the party and the nation.
I think it might also.
I think it's a good idea.
Sure.
I don't know that this is the magic bullet that she just sold it as.
Yeah.
I think it matters who the woman of color is.
I do too.
Because I feel like it's so funny. I mean, this is like this brand of Democrats really doesn't get something about why they're not clicking with the left. And a lot of it has to do with, of course, you want the party to look representative. Of course, you want our presidential candidates to be representative. Yeah. You also want them to be politically representative, though.
Right.
And it is not enough to just put a woman of color on the ticket if that woman of color is just any rando woman of color who doesn't bring anything politically to the conversation.
Right. That's the thing.
I'm
sure these women of color would all acknowledge that they are not all the same.
Exactly. And you can
we shouldn't treat them as if they're all the same. Like, we shouldn't just rush out any old black woman to be on the ticket. Like, put one on the ticket. Yes, fine. I don't even disagree with that statement, but it's just like, I think Amy Klobuchar would contend that literally anyone on the list would do.
Yes. I think the way that the kind of mainline Democrats talk about this is often in the context of representative.
And that's offensive.
Politics.
It should be offensive to those women.
It's offensive to everyone who wants to be able to vote for a person.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean,
but if I was on the short list, I would also just be offended.
Be like, I'm just on this list because I'm a random black woman, like
100%.
that. Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, it's something that I think for a long time has been bugging me about the way that they speak about diversifying the party. It's like very important that the party be representative of the voters in the party, of course.
Yeah.
But there is a way to do that so that the party is both demographically representative and also politically representative. And they seem to think that if they sell us a demographically representative party, that somehow our need for a politically representative party dissipates. And that's just not the case.
No,
don't let them tell you that you aren't also entitled to candidates who represent your views.
Right.
You're entitled to both.
Right, exactly.
We are all entitled to both.
Yes.
So in any case, screw you, Amy Klobuchar.
You know what? I just had a thought. Do you think that she did this as a way to get Elizabeth Warren to do the same thing?
Probably.
Sneaky.
Sneaky, yeah.
That'd be just like her.
Yeah, no, that's
because
close.
That's who probably scares her on the list the most.
Absolutely. And
she's the only white woman on the list.
And she is also the only one who is politically representative of the part of the party that they don't want to touch.
Bingo.
And by the way, they have studiously avoided putting a woman of color on that short list who would be representative.
Yes.
Because there are plenty.
There are.
But their kind of criteria for choosing people has specifically excluded anyone who would be both politically and demographically representative. And I feel like this would be classic Klobes.
Yep, totally.
Because by the way, she didn't just do this because she wanted to do this. This was a plan.
Yeah, of course.
Like, she discussed this with the campaign. They have plans.
Yeah, right.
In any case, good riddance to Amy Klobuchar. We
Bye.
knew you weren't going to be the vice president, and you didn't need to announce it.
Exactly.
Anyway, that's the news this week.
That's the news.
We will be back next week with more news. Every week, it's more news. That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And happy Father's Day. If you are a father,
Yes.
we're recording this on Father's Day. You won't be hearing it on Father's Day, but good work being a father. And to our fathers. Those are fathers that we have. And we will talk to you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.